I'm impressed with all these resources that you have in your head, Mark. You're able to recall a lot of these.
It's a Shark Tank thing, right?
Yeah, and just imagine, let's talk about that for a minute. Just imagine you're talking to someone on Shark Tank and they ask this question, is now a good time to start a business?
Great question, Art. It is the absolute best time in the history of starting businesses to start a business, and I'll tell you why. Number one, big companies aren't quite sure what's going to happen next. Work from home, competition, how much of their business will return. And traditionally, big companies really try to keep things the way they were, and medium-sized companies as well. They want things to go back to the way they were. Small businesses, as you've heard with some of the questions we've had, they're concerned about just how to stay in business and what comes next. But they have to deal with legacy things. If you're a restaurant, how do you change the restaurant you've already built? If you're a clothing store, how do you deal with returns and people trying things on? And your store is already designed for the way things used to be. If you're starting from scratch right now, you already have a good feel for all the new rules post-pandemic. You already have a good feel for your thoughts on how to incorporate social distancing if that's applicable, work from home if that's applicable. So it's feasible to start a company with no office, everybody working from home, working from the laptops with just a broadband connection, and do anything. And honestly, Art, I think in 20 years, we'll look back and there'll be 20, 30, 50 companies that just changed the world, that was just world-class and world-changing, that were started during the pandemic of 2020.
We've got a question from Dan. He lives in Dallas, Texas, and watches the CW33. And Dan says, 22 states are seeing a rise in positive COVID-19 cases, Texas among them. Where's the balance between protecting lives and providing livelihoods?
That's a great question, Dan, and I don't have a good answer for you. I mean, my business hat, when I put on my business hat, I'm a big believer in American exceptionalism, and I think we have amazing scientists that are going to come up with a solution. And I'm more a fan of, a little bit of slow walking as opposed to rushing. But the reality is, whether you think it was too soon or not soon enough to open back up, what we've done is what we've done. And so we're going to have to learn very quickly the results. Texas and Dallas have been open for about a month now. We're seeing a rise in cases, but we're not seeing a big rise in deaths. And that's a good thing. So maybe we're getting smarter about how we deal with it. Maybe people from more vulnerable populations are still being strict and staying home. So, I don't have a good answer for you in terms of balance, but we're going to find out very quickly whether or not we're going to have a big resurgence or a serious resurgence.
All right, here's our first sports-related question. It comes from Terrence here in Birmingham, Alabama. He watches CBS 42 News, and he says, I'm a college athlete at a D3 school, so I'm not on an athletic scholarship. I'm worried about starting workouts again in the summer and going back to play in the fall. Football is important to me, but it is not my entire life. I'm worried I could be exposed to COVID-19 through football. Is it worth the risk to play sports during a pandemic?
That's a great question. That's a conversation to have with your athletic director. Even with the D3 school football program, they're going to have to take precautions. And talking to the AD, you're going to be able to get a good sense to what precautions they're taking. Like with the NBA, we're going to be quarantined when we go back to play in Orlando in July. And all the players are going to be in a single hotel. They won't be able to just come and go as they please because we want to reduce the touch points and reduce the risk. In terms of, getting yourself to a point of confidence and comfort, again, talk to your athletic director. If you don't feel comfortable, don't do it. I mean, you've got a long life ahead of you. Maybe you're that anecdotal, that exceptional D3 player that has a chance to play in the NFL. But if you're one of the 99.99% others, this is more about your life and your future. And, if it were me or my child, I would say to be very conservative. And, if you're not 100% confident, then don't play.
The National Bureau of Economic Research now says what I think we already knew, but they made it official. We're in a recession. That brings us to London from Albany, New York's question. She watches News 10 ABC, and she asked this: will the economy be sluggish in its comeback?
Yes. Yeah, no question about it. I mean, just think of all the questions, that we've just had here on the show. Small businesses having uncertainty, people having uncertainty about their jobs. What happens when people are uncertain about their economic future or their health for that matter, we save more money. We don't go out and spend as much. And we're an economy that's driven by consumer demand. And so until people really feel confident in their jobs, they're going to save as much as they can, because this is the rainy day that they're saving for, and they don't know when the rain's going to stop. And so that's going to be a problem that I think really keeps us in this recession. I don't think it's going to be horrific. I don't think it's a depression by any stretch, but it's going to keep us here. So you've got to, as a business person, plan accordingly. And as a consumer, really look and really make sure you understand your personal financial situation. With whatever you need to do, now's the time to start budgeting.
Okay, we've got our last viewer question now, and it's from Patrick in San Diego, California. He watches on Fox 5, and he says, I believe the coronavirus crisis and the resulting PPE shortage has illuminated America's reliance on international trade for medical supplies. Should our country be looking to get back to a place where made in America becomes the norm?
Yes, absolutely, positively. The question becomes, how do we do it? You can do it the America 1.0 way, where you think that everything's an assembly line like it was in the 60s and 70s. But the problem is we're not going to be able to compete globally, and our pricing is going to be far higher than buying it from other countries. Or we can invest in new technologies like artificial intelligence or robotics. And the reality is robotics is really what's going to drive the future of manufacturing and the future of job creation. Because with robotics, the only way I can say this is we can kick China's butt. We can use what we're great at, which is technology, and really create new types of manufacturing that allows us to make not just PPE, not just drugs, but also everything and anything that's sitting around your house, the things that we're buying that are traditionally made overseas. We can use advanced technology to bring that manufacturing home and create a ton of jobs around it. So if we can get, when the federal government, regardless of who's in charge, when we start talking about infrastructure jobs, in my opinion, it's time to look at infrastructure as investing in new technologies for the specific reason of bringing back manufacturing.